Millionaire sees maid sleeping on the floor and decides to change her life. Richard Morgan remained motionless in his leather armchair, his eyes fixed on a scene he never imagined witnessing in his own mansion. Melissa, the maid who had worked in his home for just 3 months, was lying on the cold marble floor using a dishcloth as an improvised pillow. The clock read 2 in the morning when Richard went downstairs to fetch a glass of water, unable to sleep after yet another argument with Catherine, his wife. What he found in that hallway would change not only Melissa's life but especially his own, in ways he could never have imagined. "Melissa," he whispered, but the young woman was fast asleep, her black and white uniform wrinkled, her face marked by exhaustion. Richard approached slowly, noticing for the first time her worn-out shoes carefully placed beside her. A plastic bag with what appeared to be clothes was propped against the wall. The moonlight streaming through the tall windows illuminated her serene face, which, even in exhaustion, held an expression of peace. Something stirred inside him. Through all those years building his import empire, Richard had distanced himself from people, focused solely on numbers and profits. Seeing that, scene made him question when he had become so blind to what was happening under his own roof. Melissa shifted slightly, clutching the cloth she used as a pillow tighter. Richard noticed her hands, young but already marked by hard labor. How many nights had she slept there? Why wasn't she in her room at the back of the house? The businessman quietly returned to his office, his mind racing. He picked up Melissa's employment contract. Address, Daisy Street, 47, Hope Gardens, over 2 hours away. Work hours, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Salary, 1.5 times the minimum wage. The numbers jumped out at him like never before. Melissa left home at 4 a.m. to arrive promptly at 6. She finished at 8 p.m., but buses at that hour were scarce. She probably got home after midnight, only to wake up again at 3:30. When did this young woman truly sleep? Richard ran a hand through his graying hair, feeling the weight of his neglect. In his 52 years of life, he had built a fortune worth millions. Yet he couldn't see the suffering of an employee who worked in his own home. That early morning, he made the first of many decisions that would transform his life. He took a blanket from the closet and, careful not to wake her, covered Melissa. The young woman sighed in her sleep, pulling the blanket closer. Richard went upstairs but couldn't fall back asleep. He stood on his bedroom balcony, gazing at the night sky, thinking of all the Melissas who must be out there, sleeping on cold floors because the system he himself helped perpetuate gave them no alternatives. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. By dawn, Richard had made several decisions. He went downstairs earlier than usual and found Melissa already up, hurriedly folding the blanket, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Richard, I'm so sorry, I just..." Her words tumbled out. "Sit down, Melissa. We need to talk." The young woman paled, surely thinking she was about to be fired. Richard noticed how she clenched her hands, her knuckles white with tension. "It's not what you think. I want to understand why you were sleeping in the hallway." Melissa lowered her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "The buses at night take so long, sir. Sometimes I wait over an hour and a half. By the time I get home, it's almost 2 in the morning. To wake up at 3:30 and get here by 6, she paused, swallowing hard. "On Mondays and Thursdays, when Mrs. Catherine has guests and dinner runs late, I sleep here just for a few hours. I promise I don't disturb anything." Richard felt a lump in his throat. Mondays and Thursdays. Twice a week, this young woman sacrificed even the little comfort of her own bed just to make sure she'd arrive on time for work. "And why don't you sleep in the maid's room?" Melissa flushed even deeper. "Mrs. Catherine, she said the room is only for use during work hours, to change clothes and store belongings, not for sleeping outside agreed-upon times." The revelation hit Richard like a punch. Catherine, his wife, always so concerned with etiquette and appearances, had denied an exhausted employee a decent place to rest. "How long has this been going on?" "Since I started 3 months ago, but it's no trouble, sir. I'm used to it. I've slept in worse places." Those last words echoed in Richard's mind. I've slept in worse places. What kind of life had this young woman endured? He studied her more closely. She couldn't be older than 25, her face pretty despite the exhaustion, her brown eyes now fixed on him with a mix of fear and resignation. Do you live alone? With my mother and younger brother. My father. She hesitated. He left when Ethan was born with health problems, said he couldn't handle having a special needs child. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. Another layer of hardship in her story. What kind of condition does your brother have? Cerebral palsy. He needs constant care, physical therapy, medication. That's why Melissa straightened her shoulders. That's why I'm so grateful for this job, Mr. Richard. The pay helps a lot with expenses. The businessman stood walking to the window. Outside, the immaculate garden of his mansion was just beginning to glow in the early sunlight. How many unnecessary luxuries did he maintain while people like Melissa struggled for basic survival? Starting today, you'll have a new schedule, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Melissa's eyes widened. But sir, Mrs. Catherine, I'll speak to my wife. Also, the maid's room is now yours to use whenever needed. And Melissa, he turned to face her, your salary will be raised to 3 minimum wages. Tears spilled down the young woman's face before she could stop them. Sir, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just keep doing your job with the same dedication as always. Now go home and rest. Come back tomorrow at the new time. Melissa stood on shaky legs. She moved to leave but turned back. Why are you doing this for me? Richard thought for a moment before answering, because I've finally opened my eyes to what's been right in front of me all along. After Melissa left, still stunned by the sudden changes, Richard braced himself for the battle ahead. He'd known Catherine for 27 years and knew exactly how she'd react. He didn't have to wait long. At 8 in the morning, he heard her heels clicking hurriedly down the stairs. Richard, where's Melissa? Breakfast isn't ready. He waited for her in the dining room, hands folded on the table. I sent Melissa home. She'll return tomorrow on the new schedule. New schedule? Catherine's tone was dangerous. What nonsense is this? I found out she's been sleeping on the hallway floor because you forbade her from using the maid's room. Catherine lifted her chin defiantly. So, I don't pay her to sleep here. If she can't manage her own time. Enough, Catherine. Richard's voice cut through the air. That young woman leaves home at 4 in the morning to be here by 6. She works 14-hour days and still has to care for her mother and a brother with cerebral palsy. Personal problems are none of our business. Richard observed his wife, her perfectly made-up face even at that early hour, the expensive jewelry, the designer dress. When had she become so cold? Do you know what the problem is, Catherine? We've become exactly the kind of people we always criticized. Remember when we were young and promised we'd be different? We were naive. The real world doesn't run on romanticism. No, the real world runs on people like Melissa sacrificing themselves so people like us can live in luxury without even noticing. Catherine huffed, irritated. Fine, do your charity work, but don't expect me to agree with it. And when the other employees start asking for raises too, maybe it's time to review all salaries. Have you lost your mind? She slammed her hand on the table. Are we going to go bankrupt because of your conscience crisis? Richard stood up, his decision made. Catherine, my company made 50 million last year. I think we can pay decent wages without going broke. He left, leaving his wife furious, but the morning still held surprises. At the office, Richard called an emergency meeting with the HR department. I want a full audit. Salaries, benefits, working conditions, everything. Thomas, the HR director, frowned. Any specific issue, sir? The issue is I've discovered employees sleeping on the floor because they can't afford transportation. I want to know how many others are in similar situations. The audit revealed alarming data. Of the company's 300 employees, over 100 lived more than 2 hours away. 60% earned less than 2 minimum wages. 20 employees had resigned in the last 6 months because they couldn't cover transportation costs. Richard spent the entire afternoon reviewing spreadsheets, crunching numbers. In the end, he made decisions that would infuriate his board. A 40% across-the-board salary increase, full transportation subsidies, a subsidized cafeteria, and extended health coverage for families. When he returned home that night, he found Catherine in the living room, surrounded by her club friends. The atmosphere turned icy when he entered. "Darling," Catherine's falsely sweet tone fooled no one. "I was just telling the girls about your stew policies." Barbara, one of the friends, cleared her throat. "Richard, don't you think you're being a bit hasty, raising the maid's salary just like that? If you knew the conditions she lives in—" "Oh, darling," Catherine interrupted. "Next thing, you'll want to adopt her whole family." The women laughed, a cruel sound that made Richard realize the chasm between him and the world he'd helped build. That night he slept in his office. He couldn't share a bed with someone who had so little empathy for others' suffering. Around 3 in the morning, he went downstairs again, almost expecting to find Melissa in the hallway, but he found only silence and his own thoughts. The next day, Melissa arrived promptly at 8. Her face rested for the first time since she'd started working there. Richard discreetly observed her throughout the day, the efficient way she organized the house, the kindness she showed even to inanimate objects, her attention to every detail. At lunch, he called her over. "Melissa, I need you to tell me more about your brother, the treatments he needs." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness, sir." "It's not kindness, it's justice. Please tell me." Gradually, the story unfolded. Ethan, 15 years old, intelligent despite his physical limitations. He needed physical therapy 3 times a week, but they could only afford one. Expensive, medications that often ran out. His mother, Mrs. Jenkins, who had sacrificed her own health caring for her son. "My dream is to get him a motorized wheelchair. Ethan loves to read, you know, but he depends on someone to turn the pages. With an adapted chair, he'd have more independence." Richard made mental notes. A motorized wheelchair. It couldn't be that expensive, considering what he spent on a single business dinner. "And you, Melissa? What are your dreams?" She blushed. "Me? Oh, my dreams don't matter much." "They do. Tell me." I'd like to study nursing, to take better care of Ethan and maybe help other families. But it's just a silly dream." "Why silly?" "College is expensive, sir, and I wouldn't have time working and taking care of my family." Richard nodded, more plans forming in his mind, but his thoughts were interrupted by Catherine's abrupt arrival. "Melissa, I need you to clean the closet right now. I'm going out and it's a mess." "Yes, ma'am." After Melissa left, Catherine glared at her husband. "I hope these chats don't become a habit. I don't want the staff thinking they're close to us." "She's a human being, Catherine. She has a story, a family, dreams." "So what? We all have problems. The difference is some of us work to overcome them instead of waiting for handouts." Richard felt anger rising. "Work? When was the last time you worked, Catherine?" Her face turned red. "I manage this house." "No, Melissa manages this house. You spend the money I earn. How dare you?" "It's the truth. And you know what? Kels, I'm tired of it. Tired of living in this bubble of privilege while good people suffer around us." Catherine narrowed her eyes. "Be careful, Richard. Don't do anything you'll regret." "The only regret I have is not seeing the truth sooner." The tension between them grew in the following days. Richard began spending more time at home, observing, learning. He discovered Melissa hummed softly while working, always the same melancholic tune. He noticed she saved leftovers in containers, probably to take home. He saw she had a habit of talking to herself, small comments about the day, as if speaking to someone invisible. One afternoon he found her in the garden, watching the birds with a serene smile. "Do you like birds?" She startled. "Sorry, sir. I'll get back to work." "No, please, stay. I was asking if you like birds." "I do. They're free. They can go wherever they want." She paused. "My father used to raise canaries. It's one of the few good memories I have of him." "It must have been hard when he left." Melissa shrugged. "Ethan needed me more than I needed a father. You adapt." That resilience struck Richard deeply. How old had she been when she had to grow up? What childhood had been stolen from her? That night, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He called his lawyer. I need to set up a foundation, something to help families with special needs, children. That'll cost a fortune, Richard, are you sure? Absolutely. But Richard's changes didn't go unnoticed. The next day, his partner, Howard Mitchell, showed up unannounced. Richard, we need to talk. Word's getting around that. You're doing crazy things. Ridiculous raises, unnecessary benefits. Unnecessary for who, Howard? For the company's profits. We have shareholders to answer to. And employees to respect. Howard shook his head. What happened to you? You sound like one of those iPhone socialists. What happened is I woke up. I saw an employee sleeping on my floor because the salary we pay doesn't let her live with dignity. So what? It's always been this way, always will be. That's the market. Then maybe it's time to change the market. The argument dragged on for hours, with Howard threatening to call the board, sue for mismanagement, dissolve the partnership. Richard stood his ground. When Howard finally stormed out, fuming with rage, Richard found Melissa standing at the door holding a tray with coffee. I'm sorry, sir. I thought you might want some coffee. Did you hear? She lowered her eyes. Not intentionally. And what do you think? Melissa hesitated before answering. I think you're very brave, but I'm afraid of what might happen to you, to your business, because of me. This isn't because of you, Melissa. It's because of me, because I need to look at myself in the mirror without feeling ashamed. A tear rolled down her cheek. No one ever fought for me like this. Then it's about time someone did. But the consequences of Richard's decisions soon began to show. Catherine started sleeping in the guest room, barely speaking to him. Some important clients began questioning the company's new policies. Anonymous emails circulated among shareholders, questioning the CEO's mental state. One morning, Richard found Melissa crying in the kitchen. What happened? Mrs. Catherine. She said I'm to blame for destroying your marriage. Said I'm... She couldn't finish. Richard felt his blood boil. What exactly did she say? It doesn't matter, sir. She's right. Ever since you started being kind to me, everything started falling apart. Maybe it's best if I resign. No. The vehemence of his reply startled them both. Melissa, you're not to blame for anything. If my marriage is falling apart, it's because it was already rotten inside. But, sir... Richard. You can call me Richard. I can't. It wouldn't be proper. You know what's not proper. Someone working 14 hours a day and still not being able to pay the bills. A mother having to choose between medicine for her child or food. That's what's improper. Melissa wiped her tears. You don't understand. People like me, we're used to it. That's how the world works. What if I said I want to change that, at least in the part of the world I control? I'd say you're a dreamer, and dreamers get hurt in this world. There was a melancholic wisdom in her words that broke Richard's heart. At just 25, Melissa had already given up on dreaming. In the following days, the situation at home became unbearable. Catherine staged a full-blown domestic rebellion, criticizing everything Melissa did, inventing humiliating tasks, constantly reminding her of her place. Richard intervened when he could, but Catherine was clever, waiting, until he left to unleash her venom. Melissa, for her part, endured it all with a quiet dignity that only deepened Richard's admiration for her. One evening, Richard decided to pay an unexpected visit to Melissa's home. He needed to see for himself the reality she faced. Hope Gardens was even worse than he'd imagined. Unpaved streets, open sewers, houses crammed together. Melissa's home was a simple two-room structure, the paint peeling, the roof patched with mismatched tiles. Mrs. Jenkins greeted him with suspicion, then shock when he introduced himself. You're Melissa's boss. Did something happen? No, ma'am. I came to meet Ethan. The boy was in a tiny room lying on an adapted bed. His eyes, identical to Melissa's, shone with intelligence. Are you the good man Melissa talks about? Richard swallowed hard. She talks about me. Every night. Says, you're different, that you care about people. During the visit, Richard saw the harsh reality. Half doses of medicine because there wasn't enough money for the full prescription, the old and rusted wheelchair, the worn-out books Ethan read over and over because they were the only ones He had. "I'm sorry you had to see this," said Mrs. Jenkins. "Melissa would be furious if she knew. She's very proud. Pride is important, but it shouldn't stand in the way of accepting help." When he got home, Richard found Catherine waiting in the living room, her face a mask of anger. "Where were you?" But before he could answer, she continued, "Never mind. I got a very interesting call today. Seems my husband has been visiting slums. I went to meet Melissa's family." "Of course you did." Her tone dripped with sarcasm. "Next, you'll want to move them in here? Don't be ridiculous." "You're the ridiculous one, Richard, a 52-year-old man acting like a rebellious teenager. Do you know what they're saying at the club? That you're having an affair with the maid." "What? That's absurd, and is it? Then explain this sudden obsession, the private talks, the raises, the visits." "It's called compassion, Catherine. Something you clearly don't understand." "Compassion." She spat the word. "See how far compassion gets you when you bankrupt the company with this madness." Richard stared at her for a long moment. "You know the difference between us, Catherine. I built something, you just consumed it. And now that I want to use what I built to do good, you panic because it might affect your lifestyle." "My lifestyle. Our lifestyle. Or have you forgotten you're married?" "I haven't. But I'm starting to wonder why." The silence that followed was cutting. Catherine slowly stood up. "I'm going to my mother's. Call me when you come to your senses. But fair warning, my patience has limits." After she left, Richard sat in the empty living room, the weight of the last weeks pressing on his shoulders. Was he doing the right thing? Or was he really destroying everything he'd built for some quixotic impulse? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, Melissa arrived with red, tearful eyes. "Mr. Richard, I need to talk to you." "What happened?" "Last night, someone came to my house. My mother said it was you." "Yes, it was me. I'm sorry if I overstepped. It's not that. It's just..." She took a deep breath. "Right after your visit, 2 men showed up. They said they were from the health department, that they'd received a complaint about the house's conditions. They threatened to take Ethan away, said we couldn't care for him." Richard felt his blood run cold. "What did these men look like?" "One of them. I think I've seen him before. At the club Mrs. Catherine sometimes goes to. He's security." There it clicked. Catherine. She'd sent them to intimidate Melissa and her family. "Melissa, listen carefully. No one is taking Ethan from you, I promise. But sir, if they come back, I'll handle it. Trust me." But Melissa shook her head, tears streaming. "I can't work here anymore. It's too dangerous for my family, for you. I came to resign." "I won't accept it." "Sir, please." "Melissa, if you leave now, they win. The people who think they can trample on others, who use fear as a weapon. Is that what you want? I want my family safe, and they will be, I promise." Richard picked up the phone and called his lawyer in front of her. "Michael, I need you to go to Hope Gardens right now. Bring a team. I want full legal protection for the Wilson family, and find out who sent 2 men to threaten them last night." When he hung up, Melissa looked at him with a mix of gratitude and fear. "Why are you doing all this?" Richard thought before answering. "Because I've spent my entire life on the wrong side of this war, thinking I deserve more because I have more. But you, Melissa, you showed me that true worth has nothing to do with a bank account. I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did. You survive. Every day, against all odds, you wake up and face a world that wasn't made for people like you. And you do it with dignity, with kindness. Do you know how many people in my social circle would do the same?" Melissa lowered her eyes. "You're romanticizing poverty. There's nothing noble about having no choice." "I'm not romanticizing anything. I'm recognizing strength where it exists, and deciding to use my privilege to level the playing field a little." "And if you lose everything?" Richard shrugged. "Then I'll find out if I have half the strength you do." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Thomas from HR. "Sir, we have a problem. Howard has called an emergency board meeting. He wants to vote on your removal as CEO." Richard sighed. "When?" "Today at 3 o'clock. I'll be there." When he hung up, he found Melissa still standing there, wringing her hands. "See, you're losing everything because of me. It's not because of you, it's because of my choice, and you know what? I don't regret it." The board meeting was a bloodbath. Howard had laid the groundwork well, charts showing projected profit declines, testimonials from concerned clients, even a psychiatrist willing to question Richard's mental health. "Gentlemen," Howard concluded his presentation, "Richard Morgan built this company, no one denies that, but he's clearly going through some kind of crisis that risks everything we've built together." Richard stood to defend himself. "What risks our company is the short-sightedness of thinking we can keep exploiting people indefinitely. The world is changing, gentlemen. People are waking up. Either we change with them or we'll be left behind." "Nice speech," one of the board members sneered, "but speeches don't pay dividends." "You know what else doesn't pay dividends? Unmotivated employees, high turnover, labor lawsuits. We're sitting on a ticking time bomb and you want to keep striking matches." The debate dragged on for hours. In the end, by a narrow margin, Richard kept his position. But he left the meeting knowing he'd won a battle, not the war. When he got home, it was already night. He found Melissa finishing up in the kitchen. "It's still here. I wanted to make sure everything was in order. Mrs. Catherine could be back any moment." "I doubt it." Richard sank heavily into a chair. "How's your family?" "Scared. But the lawyer you sent was very kind. Said he'd take care of everything." "Good." Melissa hesitated, then sat across from him. "Can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "Happy? Yes, with all this." She gestured around. "The mansion, the money, the power. Are you happy?" Richard considered lying, giving the expected answer, but something in her eyes demanded honesty. "No, I haven't been happy in a long time, maybe never. Just too busy to notice." "And now?" "Now," he smiled sadly. "Now I'm realizing happiness might be about purpose, not possessions." Melissa nodded, as if she understood deeply. "My mother always says happiness is being able to sleep without fear and wake up with hope. Your mother is a wise woman." "Yes. Too bad we rarely get both." They sat in silence for a moment, two different worlds united by a shared understanding of life's complexity. "Mr. Richard?" "Yes?" "Thank you for everything, even if it goes wrong, even if we have to run. Thank you for trying." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Melissa's words echoed in his mind. Sleep without fear, wake up with hope. When was the last time he had done any of those things? Around 3 a.m, his phone rang. Michael, his lawyer. "Richard, we found out who sent the men, and you're not going to like it. Catherine. Worse, Howard. It seems he and Catherine are working together. There's more." Michael paused. "We found evidence that Howard has been embezzling money from the company for years. Small amounts, but steady, probably hoping you'd never notice." Richard sat up in bed, wide awake now. "Do you have proof?" "Enough for an investigation. But, Richard, if this comes out, it could destroy the company. The scandals, the bad publicity. And if it doesn't come out, I'm still partners with a thief. It's a tough choice." Richard thought of Melissa, of Ethan, of all the employees who depended on that company. "Set up a meeting with Howard. Tomorrow, alone. We'll handle this my way." The next morning, Richard woke with a clarity of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He went downstairs and found Melissa making coffee. "Good morning. Did you sleep here?" She blushed. "The last bus was too crowded. I thought it'd be better." "Melissa, I meant what I said about the room. It's yours to use whenever you need." "I know, it's just I'm not used to it, to so much kindness." Richard poured himself coffee, thoughtful. "I need a favor from you. Anything. If something happens to me, I want you to go to Michael Foster, my lawyer. He'll take care of you and your family." Melissa paled. "Sir, what's going to happen?" "Nothing, I hope. But I need to make sure you're protected. Mr. Morgan, please don't do anything dangerous. It's not worth it." "Yes, it is. Some things are very much worth it." The meeting with Howard was on neutral ground, a quiet restaurant downtown. His former friend arrived confident. clearly thinking he had the upper hand. "Richard, good to settle this like civilized men." "Cut the act, Howard. I know about the embezzlement." The color drained from the other man's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Richard placed a folder on the table. 10 years, 300,000 a year, 3 million total. Should I keep going? Howard opened and closed his mouth several times. "Richard, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want your resignation, quiet and immediate. In exchange, I won't press charges. You can't prove anything. I can, and you know it. The question is, do you want to walk away, or do you want me to ruin your life?" Howard drank water with trembling hands. "What about Catherine?" "What? About her? Come on, Richard. You know she and I, that we—" The final piece fell into place. Richard felt more pity than anger. "How long?" 2 years. Maybe 3. Richard laughed, a humorless laugh. "And here I was worried she thought I had something going on with Melissa." "You don't?" Howard seemed genuinely surprised. "No, Howard. Some people can care about others without ulterior motives. I know that's a hard concept for you to grasp. Then what is it? Why this obsession with the maid?" Richard considered the question. "Maybe because she reminds me of who I used to be, before the money, before the power, when I still believed I could make a difference in the world." "And can you? Make a difference?" "I'll find out. Without you, and without Catherine." Howard signed the resignation papers right there. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. "Richard, be careful. There are powerful people who want to keep things the way they are. People who won't like these changes of yours. Is that a threat?" "It's a warning from an old friend." After Howard left, Richard sat alone in the restaurant, processing everything. In just a few days, he'd lost his wife and his partner, but strangely, he felt lighter than he had in years. When he got home, he stopped in the doorway at the sight before him. Melissa was sitting in the living room reading aloud. But she wasn't alone. Ethan was there, in the old wheelchair, his eyes shining as he listened to his sister. "Melissa!" She jumped up, her face flushed. "Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have, but the physical therapist cancelled, and I thought if I brought Ethan just for today." "It's fine." Richard approached the boy. "Pleasure to meet you properly, Ethan." The boy smiled, a smile that lit up the whole room. "You have an amazing library. Melissa said I couldn't touch anything, but can I look?" "You can touch anything you want. In fact," Richard had an idea. "How about picking some to take home?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Really?" "Richard, we can't," Melissa began. "Yes, you can. Actually," he made a sudden decision. "Ethan, how about coming here 3 times a week? We could start a book club, you, me, Melissa, when she has time." Ethan looked at his sister with such hope she couldn't refuse. "If you're sure." "Absolutely." That afternoon, while Melissa worked, Richard and Ethan talked about books, dreams, the body's limitations versus the mind's freedom. The boy was brilliant, his intelligence trapped only by circumstance. "You know what I want most?" Ethan confided. "To go to school, to really learn, not just from the old books Melissa brings." "Why don't you?" "The neighborhood school isn't equipped, and the ones that are too expensive." Richard made more mental notes, more problems to solve, more injustices to fight. When Melissa returned to pick them up, her eyes were moist. "I've never seen Ethan so happy. He's a special boy." "Thank you for seeing that. Most people just see the wheelchair. Most people are blind to what really matters." That night, Richard researched inclusive schools, scholarship programs, necessary adaptations. Each discovery was a mix of hope and outrage. Solutions existed, but were out of reach for those who needed them most. The next day, Catherine appeared with a lawyer. "I came for my things, and to discuss the divorce." Richard studied her, perfectly made up as always, but something was different. A hardness in her eyes he'd never noticed before. "As you wish. Melissa's off today, but I can help with the bags." "Melissa's off?" Catherine laughed. "You've really lost it, giving the maid days off now." "Everyone deserves rest, Catherine." "Oh, Richard, always a dreamer. That's what drew me at first. Too bad dreams don't pay bills. Howard told me about you two. She didn't flinch. So, you have your little maid. I had Howard. We're even. There's nothing between Melissa and me. Physically, maybe. But emotionally. You're in love with her, Richard. With the idea of her, the honest poor girl who needs saving. You don't understand anything. I understand more than you think. You're having a classic midlife crisis. Instead of buying a motorcycle or having an affair, you're playing hero. But heroes always fall, Richard. And when you do, she won't be there to pick you up. People like her know how to survive. People like you just crumble. Catherine's words echoed even after she left. Was there truth there? Was he just living a redemption fantasy? His phone rang. It was Melissa. Mr. Morgan, sorry to call your cell, but it's urgent. Ethan's in the hospital. Richard's heart raced. What happened? A breathing crisis, the meds. We couldn't afford the full dose this month. I don't know what to do. Which hospital? Hope Gardens General. I'm on my way. Sir, you don't have to. Melissa, I'm coming. The hospital was a portrait of neglect. Moldy walls, outdated equipment, overcrowding. Richard found Melissa in the hallway being comforted by Mrs. Jenkins. How is he? Stable, but he needs medication the hospital doesn't have. They said we have to buy it, but Melissa didn't finish. Richard went straight to the doctor on duty. I want the best available treatment for Ethan Wilson. Transfer to a private hospital if necessary. Send all the bills to me. The doctor looked at him skeptically. Are you a relative? I'm a family friend, Richard Morgan. Here's my card. The change was instant. Suddenly, Ethan had a private room, specialists were called, and medication appeared. Melissa pulled Richard aside. I can't accept this, it's too much. Melissa, please, let me help. Why? Why do you care so much? Richard held her hands, feeling the calluses from hard work. Because you reminded me of what I'd forgotten. That people matter more than profits. That dignity is priceless. That, he paused, Catherine's words returning to him, that maybe I need you more than you need me. Melissa studied him for a long moment. You're a good man, Richard Morgan. No, but I'm trying to be. Ethan spent 3 days in the hospital. Richard spent every one of them there, sharing the vigil with Melissa and Mrs. Jenkins. It was during those long hours that he truly learned their story. Melissa's father had been a bitter man who blamed the world for his failures. When Ethan was born with cerebral palsy, it was the last straw. He left, leaving only debts and broken hearts behind. Melissa was 15. Overnight, she had to grow up. She dropped out of school and started working, cleaning, sewing, whatever she could find. The worst part wasn't him leaving. Melissa confessed one night. It was what he said before he left, that Ethan was a punishment, that we'd never have a normal life because of him. And you believed that? For a while. I was so angry. At my father, at God, even at Ethan, but... Tavis? She looked at her sleeping brother. Then I realized Ethan didn't ask to be born this way, and if the world wouldn't be kind to him, then I would be. I'd be the kindness he deserved. Richard felt his eyes burn. At 15, you understood what took me 50 years to even begin to grasp. Necessity is a harsh teacher, sir. Richard, please. She smiled. Richard. It was the first time she'd called him by his name. It sounded like music. When Ethan was discharged, Richard drove them home. Along the way, the boy chattered about the books he'd read in the hospital, his plans for the book club, and the stories he wanted to write. You know, Mr. Richard, I think I'll write about you. About me. There's nothing interesting about me. Of course there is. The rich man who discovered real wealth isn't in the bank. It's a classic. Melissa laughed. Ethan loves happy endings. And will this one have one? Richard asked. A happy ending? Ethan looked at him with the wisdom only early suffering brings. That depends on you, doesn't it? That night, alone in his empty mansion, Richard reflected on the boy's words. Happy ending. What would that even look like for him now? Catherine had taken half of everything, but he'd barely noticed. Howard was out of the company, and surprisingly, business improved. Motivated employees produced more, and news of the changes attracted conscious customers. But none of it seemed to matter as much as those moments in the hospital, holding Melissa's hand as she cried in fear for Ethan, or the joy on the boy's face when Richard brought him a stack of new books. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, a routine settled in. Ethan came 3 times a week for the book club. Melissa relaxed enough to participate when her work was done. Richard discovered she had strong opinions about literature, a sharp mind that life had forced her to hide. "You should have gone to college," he said one day after a particularly heated debate about Mark Twain. "Should have done a lot of things. But life doesn't ask what we want. And if it asked now?" Melissa looked at him confused. "I'm offering college for you." She turned so pale Richard thought she might faint. "I can't." "Why not?" Because that's not how it works. People don't just get handed college." "Why not?" "Because they don't." She was nearly shouting now. "Because if I start believing good things can happen, when it all falls apart, it'll hurt too much." Richard stepped closer slowly. "And what if it doesn't fall apart?" "It always does, always." "Melissa, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Not everything falls apart. Sometimes, just sometimes, people manage to build something solid, something good. You don't understand. People like you can afford to believe in happy endings. People like me, we learn early that hope is a luxury too expensive." Richard felt the weight of those words. How many dreams had she buried? How many hopes had she smothered to survive? "Then let me hope for you, until you can hope again." Melissa began to cry. Silent tears that seemed to come from a very deep well. "I'm so scared." "Of what?" "Of waking up. Of finding out this was all a dream. That you'll get tired of playing savior and everything will go back to how it was." Richard did something that surprised them both. He hugged her. A careful, respectful hug, but full of a certainty he didn't even know he had. "It's not a dream, and I'm not playing. This is real, Melissa. As real as the floor you slept on." She let herself be held for a moment before pulling away. "If I go to college, I keep working. I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's justice. Do you think I got where I am alone? I had opportunities. I'm just passing them on. And if I fail, then you'll have failed trying. Which is infinitely better than failing because you never tried." Melissa wiped her tears. "Nursing, that's what I want." "Then nursing it is." But the universe seemed determined to test Richard's newfound resolve. The next day, he arrived. At the office to find a war zone. Agitated employees, phones ringing non-stop. Thomas from HR pale as paper. "What happened?" "Sabotage. Someone leaked false information to the press. They're saying the company is on the verge of bankruptcy, that you're diverting funds for personal projects." Richard picked up the newspapers. The headlines were cruel. "Mentally unstable businessman squanders fortune. Employees fear for future after radical changes." "Howard," he murmured. "There's more." Thomas seemed even more nervous. 3 of our biggest clients cancelled contracts. Said they can't risk working with an unstable company. Richard sat down heavily. Was Catherine right? Was he destroying everything in a quixotic crusade? "Sir, what do we do?" Richard thought of Melissa, of Ethan, of all the employees now. "Earning fair wages. Call the press, we'll open the books, total transparency. Let them see exactly where the money's going." "Are you sure?" "This is unprecedented." "Then we'll set a precedent." The press conference was controlled chaos. Richard faced hostile questions with a calm he didn't feel. "Mr. Morgan, don't you think it's irresponsible to raise wages by 40%? "I think it's irresponsible to pay starvation wages while the company profits millions. And the shareholders? They'll still profit. Just a fair profit, not an obscene one. Sources say you're having an affair with an employee. Did that influence these decisions?" Richard felt anger rising but kept his composure. "My personal life is not up for discussion. What's being discussed is whether we'll keep normalizing exploitation or build a sustainable and fair business model. The press conference changed the game. Some outlets kept attacking, but others began digging deeper. Employee stories started emerging. People who could finally pay rent, buy medicine, dream of the future. But the cost was high. More clients walked away. The board pressured him again, and Richard began feeling the weight of carrying so many hopes on his shoulders. It was Melissa who noticed. "You haven't been sleeping." It was true. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights spent balancing ideals and reality. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she said, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "You're killing yourself trying to save everyone." "I'm not trying to save anyone, just doing what's right. And if what's right costs you everything." Richard stared at her. "Would you rather I stopped, went back to how I was before?" "I'd rather you found balance. Remembered you can't help anyone if you destroy yourself in the process." Her simple wisdom struck him deeply. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to choose between my sanity and my family's survival, I chose a middle ground." "You should try it." That night, Richard rethought his strategy. Melissa was right. He was trying to fix the world all at once, and it wouldn't work. He needed to be more strategic, more patient. The next day, he called a meeting with the employees. "I know you're worried. I know the news is scary, but I want you to know, I won't roll back the raises. I won't cut benefits. We'll get through this together." The relief was palpable. Then something unexpected happened. The employees started offering suggestions, ways to save without cutting wages, ideas for new clients, proposals to boost productivity. "We're with you, Dr. Morgan," said one of the oldest workers. "You fought for us, now we fight for you." It was a turning point. The company began reorganizing not from the top down, but from the bottom up. Productivity rose. New clients drawn by the story of social transformation started appearing. But the biggest change happened at home. Ethan was thriving. With access to books and intellectual encouragement, he began writing. Stories about unlikely heroes, about worlds where differences were celebrated, not feared. "I want to be a writer," he announced one day. "A real one." "You already are," Richard said. "The world just needs to find out." Melissa had started studying for college entrance exams. At night after work, Richard found her hunched over books, brows furrowed in concentration. "Need help?" "Biology. It's been so long it feels like another language." They spent hours reviewing concepts. Richard rediscovering the joy of teaching, Melissa rediscovering the joy of learning. "You know," she said one night, "my father always said studying was a waste of time for people like us. He was wrong." "I know, but it took me a long time to believe it." "And now?" "Now." She smiled, a smile that lit up her whole face. "Now, I feel like I can be anything." It was in these moments Richard felt it was all worth it. The financial losses, the divorce, the criticism, everything paled next to the spark in Melissa's eyes when she solved a tough problem, or Ethan's joy at finishing another story. But the past wasn't ready to leave him alone. One morning, Richard woke to the doorbell ringing insistently. It was Catherine, accompanied by two men in suits. "Richard, these are my lawyers. We need to talk about the division of assets." "I thought we had already settled this." "I changed my mind. I want more. After all, I helped build all of this." "You helped?" Richard couldn't hide his disbelief. "Of course. Who do you think maintained your social life, made the important connections, ensured you had the right image? And who do you think worked 18 hours a day to build the company? Each of us contributed in our own way, and now I want my fair share, 70%. 70%? That's absurd. It's the price for me not making certain improprieties with the made public." Richard felt his blood run cold. "There are no improprieties. The judge might think differently when I testify about the nights you spent together studying, about how you support her family, about the book club with her disabled brother. You're despicable. I'm practical, so what's it going to be?" Richard looked at the woman he had shared nearly 3 decades with. When had she become this person? Or had she always been, and he was too blind to see? "Do whatever you want, Catherine, but I won't give in to blackmail. You'll regret." This. I already do for wasting so much time on someone incapable of seeing beauty in kindness. After she left, Richard found Melissa standing in the hallway, pale. I heard everything. Sir, I can't let her destroy your life because of me. Melissa, no, enough, I'm leaving. Today, now, before I cause more harm. You're not going anywhere. It's not your decision. No, but it is my house and my company. And if you leave, I'll go to Hope Gardens and camp outside your door until you come back. Why are you doing this? She shouted, tears streaming. Why won't you let me go? Because, Richard paused, the truth finally clear. Because I've fallen in love with you. The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa stared at him with wide eyes. No, you can't. I didn't choose it. It happened, but I expect nothing. I demand nothing. I just need you to know it's not a whim, not a savior complex, it's real. I'm your maid. You're the strongest, most honest, most inspiring woman I've ever known. The fact that you work for me is the least important thing. Melissa covered her face with her hands. This can't happen, it can't. The difference between us, the only difference that matters, is that you make me want to be better. Every day. What if it's just gratitude? What if I'm confusing things? Because you're the first good person in my life? Then we'll figure it out, with time, no rush, no pressure. Melissa lowered her hands, her face wet with tears. I'm so afraid. Me too. But maybe we can be afraid together. Before she could answer, Richard's phone rang. It was Thomas. Sir, we need you here urgently. We have an offer. A major international chain wants to buy 40% of the company. It's a lot of money. Richard looked at Melissa. I have to go, but we'll talk later. She nodded weakly. At the office, the offer was even bigger than Richard had imagined. Enough to solve all financial troubles, silence the critics, secure the future. But there are conditions, explained the multinational's representative. We revert to the old salary models, cut the extra benefits. Business is business. Richard flipped through the contract. With that money, he could do so much good. Start. The foundation he'd planned, help hundreds of families like Melissa's. I need to think. Of course, but don't take too long. Offers like this don't last forever. Richard spent the night awake, calculating, weighing his options. Morning he had his answer. He called a general assembly. All employees from the janitor to the manager. I've received a buyout offer. A lot of money, it will solve our financial problems. Whispers of hope. But they want to reverse everything. Salaries, benefits, all going back to how they were. The silence was heavy. That's why I'm here to ask you, what do you prefer? One of the workers raised his hand. Dr. Richard, if we go back to how it was, will we keep our jobs? Most likely. And if we refuse? We'll have to fight for a few more months, maybe years, but we'll keep our dignity. It was Melissa who spoke from the back of the room. I'd rather fight with dignity than survive without it. One by one, the employees agreed. In the end, the decision was unanimous, to reject the offer. Richard felt his eyes burn with emotion. Then we fight, together. The rejection of the offer leaked to the press. Crazy businessman turns down millions, the headlines read. But something unexpected happened. The story went viral, not as criticism, but as inspiration. Small business owners began reaching out, wanting to know how to implement similar changes. Universities invited Richard to give talks. Suddenly he wasn't a pariah anymore, but a pioneer. But the real victory happened at home. Melissa had passed her college entrance exam. I did it! She burst into the office, the paper trembling in her hands. I got in, 3rd place. Richard lifted her into the air, spinning, both laughing like children. I knew it. I always knew. When he set her down, they stood too close. The air between them thick with possibility. Richard, yes? Me too, what you said, I feel it too, but I'm so scared. Then we take it slow, one day at a time. And people, what will they say? Let them talk. We know the truth. Melissa touched his face gently. The truth is you saved my life. No, the truth is you saved mine. They kissed, a soft, hesitant kiss, full of promises and fears. When they pulled apart, Melissa was crying again. Happy tears, she explained. I didn't know they were real. But happiness is a moving target in a cynical world. News of their relationship leaked. Catherine made sure of that. Businessman leaves wife for maid. The headlines were cruel in their simplicity. Richard faced the storm head-on. In an exclusive interview, he told the whole story. How Melissa had inspired him to change. How love had grown from mutual respect and admiration. I'm not ashamed to love a hard-working, honest woman of integrity. I'm ashamed it took me so long to realize what truly matters in life. The interview divided opinions. Many criticized, but many more related. Similar stories began emerging, love that crossed social classes, people choosing heart over convention. Ethan, now writing regularly for a blog Richard had created for him, published a piece that went viral. My sister taught me that love isn't about what you can give, but what you choose to share. Richard gave us opportunities. Melissa gave him purpose. Together they gave me hope that the world can be different. The transformation at the company continued. Employees motivated and valued innovated. New products were created. Efficiency improved. In 6 months, the company wasn't just recovering, it was thriving. Richard created the foundation he'd dreamed of, the Melissa Foundation, to help families with special needs children. Melissa protested the name, but Richard wouldn't budge. You're the symbol of all this. The strength born from necessity, the beauty that blooms in adversity. The foundation offered free physical therapy, adapted wheelchairs, scholarships. In a year, it served 100 families. In 2, 500. Melissa graduated with honors. On graduation day, Richard, Mrs. Jenkins, and Ethan sat in the front row. When she stepped onto the stage to receive her diploma, the entire auditorium rose to applaud. Her story had become legend at the university. I did it, she whispered to Richard afterward. I really did. Never doubted you. Liar. You doubted me as much as I did. Maybe, but we doubted together. They married in a simple ceremony in their backyard. Ethan was the best man, proudly maneuvering his new motorized wheelchair. Mrs. Jenkins cried from start to finish. Catherine showed up midway through the reception, not to cause trouble, but to make amends. I was wrong, she admitted. You two have something real. I envied that. It was Melissa who hugged her first. Everyone deserves a second chance. The company became a case study in universities. Richard traveled giving lectures, but always came home, to Melissa, to the life they'd built together. Ethan published his first book at 17, Flying Without Wings, a collection of stories about overcoming adversity. The launch was held in the company's main hall, with every employee present. This book is for everyone who taught me that physical limits don't limit dreams, Ethan said in his speech. For my sister who gave up her youth for me, for Richard who showed me good men exist, for my mother who never gave up, and for all of you who prove every day that a better world is possible. Melissa, now head nurse at the hospital her foundation had built, openly wept. Richard held her hand, his own face wet. We did something good, she whispered. We did something necessary, he corrected. Years later, when reporters asked Richard about the moment that changed his life, he always returned to that early morning. I saw a woman sleeping on the cold floor and realized I was part of the problem, but more importantly, I realized I could be part of the solution. Was it worth it? All the losses, all the criticism? Richard would glance at Melissa, always nearby, tending to someone, saving lives with the same determination she'd saved his. I lost a fortune on paper. I gained a wealth of purpose. You tell me if it was worth it. The foundation grew, going national. Other business leaders joined the movement. Laws were changed. What began with one man seeing a woman asleep on the ground became a quiet revolution of compassion. Melissa never forgot her roots. Every week she returned to Hope Gardens, now transformed by social programs, to volunteer. You don't have to do this anymore, Richard once said. Yes, I do, to remember where I came from and to make sure others can leave here too. Ethan became an award-winning writer, an international speaker on inclusion. But he still lived with them, his chosen family, bound not by blood but by something stronger. One night, 20 years after that first dawn, Richard found Melissa in the same hallway where it all began. Only now she stood by the window, admiring the garden. "What are you thinking about?" "How life comes full circle. Who'd have guessed the girl sleeping on the floor would own this house?" "You always owned it." "I just took a while to see it." She turned to him, her hair now streaked with white, time's marks only deepening her beauty. "Know what Ethan asked me today?" "What?" "If our story had a happy ending." "And what did you say?" "That happy endings don't exist, because our story hasn't ended. It's still being written every day in every life we touch." Richard pulled her into his arms. "You were always the wisest." "No, I just learned early that happiness isn't a destination, it's the journey. And what a journey ours has been." They stood there, holding each other. Two worlds become one, proving that true love knows no social barriers. That compassion is the greatest wealth, and that it's never too late to wake up and change the world, one person at a time. From the garden came Ethan's laughter, as he taught other children with disabilities how to write. From the kitchen, the scent of Mrs. Jenkins' cake, now the foundation's head chef, filled the air. Throughout the house, the voices of many echoed, those who had found not just work but dignity there, not just help but hope. "You know," Melissa said, "sometimes I still wake up thinking I'll be on the floor. And then I see you beside me, and remember that miracles happen. Not the instant ones, not the magical ones. The miracles built day after day, choice after choice, with work, love, and faith in humanity." Richard kissed her forehead. "You're my miracle." "No, we're our miracle. All of us. Every person who chose to believe things could be different." And so in that house which had once witnessed indifference and now overflowed with love, the story continued. Not the story of a savior and a victim, but of two people who had saved each other. Not a fairy tale, but something better, a true story of transformation, where the real happy ending wasn't they lived happily ever after, but they kept fighting together to build a world where everyone could be happy. Because in the end, Richard discovered, the greatest wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in Melissa's eyes when she smiled, in Ethan's words inspiring millions, in the lives changed by the simple decision to see others as equals. And Melissa learned that delayed dreams aren't dead dreams, that it's never too late to start over, and that true love isn't what saves you. It's what gives you the strength to save yourself. Together they proved that real change doesn't come from grand gestures, but from small daily choices to be better, do better, love better. And somewhere, right now, someone is sleeping on a cold floor, waiting for someone to finally see them. The story of Richard and Melissa whispers to all of us, be that someone. Open your eyes, reach out, change a life. Because every revolution begins with a single act of compassion. Every transformation starts with someone saying, this isn't right. And every true love begins the moment we stop seeing differences and start seeing souls. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you think Richard made the right choice by completely changing his life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.